The webinar is taken from our A201 workbook, pages 10 through 13. So if you have accounting workbook A201, go ahead and turn to pages 10 through 13, and that's what I'm using as my foundation or basis for the webinar event today. If you don't have the Church Windows training workbooks, of course, you can purchase those from the Church Windows workbook page or our store. Just an FYI, we do try to follow along with the training workbooks whenever or wherever possible. Just to kind of help folks get a really good through line on how the software works and functions. If you have questions, please type those into the questions portion of the webinar control panel. I'll do my best to keep an eye on those, see what I can't do to try to get those answered. If I don't answer them during the event, I'll definitely get around to answering those at the very end. Please keep the question on topic here, okay? About our accounting reports, we got a much more detailed topic on accounting basics or conventions tomorrow as well. So you may want to hold off on get some of those, maybe ask some of those questions tomorrow if you're attending tomorrow's accounting attendance or reporting event tomorrow, simply because it goes into a lot more detail. But we are recording these training webinar events. So this will be out on the Support Center page at our website here sometime within the next 24 to 48 hours, if not sooner, maybe even by the end of the day today. Okay? But again, there may be another webinar that answers your questions that you have about the software, or, of course, if it's something specific to your data, it's probably going to be better for you to contact our support staff, 800-533, so we can get some, understanding about how your database is constructed and set up. Oftentimes on these webinars, it's not that we don't want to answer the question for you. We simply don't have enough information to provide some answers for you, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and look at, there's really not much on page 10 there on that. But basically, when we go into accounting, so let's go ahead and launch into accounting. So there's a couple different ways that you can access the reports in the accounting program, okay? First of all, we can go right here. Let me get out my highlighter. Right here, we've got this option called Reports. We're going to look at that here momentarily. But then right up here at the very top left, we've got the one that says Report/Export. And we're going to come back to that one later on, okay? So we're going to talk about the one in the middle of the screen first. They both access the reports the same exact way, but they just deal with it a little bit differently. Okay, so when we click on the little printer icon in the middle, it opens this window called Multiple Reports. This is the same exact reports that are listed, as I said, in the upper left under those various menus, but this is the entire list of reports in one location. And what this does is, if you run the same reports each and every time, whether it's weekly or monthly or quarterly, you can have the software pre-select those reports each and every time. So let's just show an example of that. So let's say I run my balance sheet, my fund activity report, and my treasurer's report. I'm double-clicking on those under the available reports list on the left, and I'm moving them over to selected reports on the right. Okay? Now, I don't like to, even when I'm running just a single report, whether I'm accessing it just once at one time during the day, I typically don't use this multiple reports. I think it requires a few more mouse clicks or a couple more mouse clicks to do that. But you decide which option is best for you. Okay, so here I've got my balance sheet, my fund activity report, and my treasurer's report listed on the right here. These are the reports I'm going to run, say, every single month, the big three. Okay, well, I don't want this in this order. I want them to print balance sheet first, then treasurer's report, then fund activity report. So I highlight the report I want to move. Notice it's now shifting my focus. Over here on the right, I use these up and down arrows, and I can flip the order of these and determine which order I want the reports to print. But I don't want to have to pre-select these I don't want to have to select these reports each and every time either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right down here to the very bottom left and click on that little disc there on the right there that when I was sitting kind of tilted on its side. When I click on that, it opens up and it says enter a name for your group, and I'm going to call this one My Monthly Reports. So we're going to take off the group on that. We're going to call this My Monthly Reports. Okay, and then when we click OK, Now I click Next, and it then opens up, say, my balance sheet, make my selections. I click Print. Okay, I close out of that. When I'm done with that report, I'm finished with that. I'm ready to print it. I close out. I cancel out of my balance sheet options. It now immediately opens up my treasurer's report. Same process starts over. Make my selections, click Print, send it to my printer. Then when I close out of that, it opens up my fund activity report. So simply, it's saving me time and effort of having to select those reports each and every time. I will still have to make my selections on each respective report for things like the periods, but all of my columns should be remembered if I choose the same columns each time. But when I now need to redo this in another month from now, let's say I'm now a month from today and I want to re-bring this up again, I now go to Reports in the middle. I go down to my menu down here at the bottom and I click my monthly reports. And boom, on the selected reports list on the right, it brings in the same reports I had selected as part of the group and in the desired order, and I can now go ahead and print those reports. So it saves me having to select these reports either individually or having to choose them and run them in the desired order that I'm wanting them each and every time. So it's just another way of being able to save some time on that for you as well, okay? So that multiple reports really can be a big time saver if you run the same reports each and every month. Okay, so we're gonna wrap that up there at that spot right there. So let's close out of there. Now let's talk about or steer our focus up to the upper left when we're talking about our reports and exports. So when we click on that, we notice now, let me grab my highlighter again, we've got these buttons or options have changed. It says financial and transaction and worksheets and budget. Well, one of the things that's commonly overlooked about those is there's little arrows pointing down on those. So if we kind of see down here on the bottom left, it's got a little down arrow. If I click on that, that tells me there's a menu here. So here are my big three, my balance sheet, fund activity report, treasurer's report. Or when I click over here under, say, transaction, it brings up another menu of some other different transaction, more detailed like reports, like my check register with my check detail or my deposit slip with my deposit transactions, my general ledger transaction journal, or my print invoices and print statements, if you have accounts receivable. Furthermore, when we click under worksheets, we've got some other more worksheet type reports, accounts payable reports, list, chart of accounts, summary of cash activity, our trial balance, and our accounts receivable report, which is essentially the opposite of our accounts payable, money we're owed as opposed to us owing money. In addition to those menus of reports, further to the right, we've got our budget report, of course. And when we click on that, it opens up our budget report, allows us to run a report that just details our budget, of course. And then to the right of that, we've got our print checks. We consider classify printing checks a report. You are printing them, and so we do categorize that under our reports and export list at the top left there. You can, of course, also access print checks right here in the bottom right, the little printer icon that says print checks. Just a reminder, you can access it in a couple different ways, okay? And then finally, tax. So when we click on that, again, it's got a little arrow on it, little Uncle Sam icon on it. We've got our 1099 miscellaneous and NEC, so if you want to produce your 1099s for your contractors and vendors from accounting, you can do that or print your 1096 from accounting as well. This won't bring in any contractors that are paid in payroll, of course. It would only be vendors and contractors that are paid strictly through accounting only, okay? And finally, over here on the right, an option to be able to export the data, so we can export some chart of accounts data, accounts payable information, or accounts receivable information, if we wish, okay? We're going to go into more of the detail in some of these reporting options and conventions that you'll find on the accounting reports again in tomorrow's webinar event. So we're not going to really get into any more detail on those. We just want you to know where you can find those reports. And like I tell folks on my support calls, typically there's more than one way to do the same function in Church Windows in accounting or in the other modules as well. So you can access your reports either by going into the reports option in the middle and selecting them or setting up your multiple report groupings, or I'm a big fan of going up to reports and export and then choosing the desired report from the options in the upper left-hand corner. That's just my preference, but you can decide for yourself which options work best for you, which option works best for you regarding that, okay? If I did have some checks waiting in the print queue, I do want to point out that there would be something here when I click on that. It takes a few seconds here, but it opens up my check printing window. I've got nothing to print here for checks. But if I close that and go to print checks in the bottom right, it opens up the same exact window. It's merely, folks, how you get to that the particular report that you're wanting on that, okay? All right. Well, we're going to leave it at that. Like I said, it's not a very difficult or terribly detailed topic today. So I'm going to end things right there.